Hello everyone, welcome to our fifth week of TRG 30. As we begin today, I'd like to remind you that you'll all receive an email with a copy of today's presentation and a video of this webinar too. And before we begin, a reminder that Q&A button at the bottom of your screen is the place to go if you have any specific questions today, and you can submit these anonymously too, if you wish. If we don't answer your question live today, then the LinkedIn TRG 30 virtual network is the place to go to find your answer. Our team are ready and waiting. I'm Stephen Skripek, and joining me again today is Jill. Jill, over to you to kick.
Thank you, Stephen. Hello, everyone. I'm Jill Robinson, CEO at TRG Arts, the results-obsessed arts and cultural consulting firm. We work internationally to help the sector be resilient, and boy, is now the time to be thinking about and acting on the things that urgently are needed for resiliency, for anticipating the needs in coming weeks, and we now see months as we look toward the future of a resilient sector, and most importantly, revolutionizing the way that we think and act so that we can evolve positively this sector through this horrible crisis that globally we are facing. Today we're going to talk about joining up, reconciling our immediate response in the sector of pushing and making available digital and online content. Something I heard described this morning as closing the distance. Hashtag closing the distance. That's what we've been trying to do in this sector. And today we're going to talk about reconciling this short-term reaction that is right and helping us close this distance with the longer-term view that we must have as we embark on this journey, this race that we're on. But we're TRG. We're going to start with the data. Stephen, help us do that.
Absolutely, Jill. I can't believe you've created another hashtag. There's over 200 organizations now signed up to our COVID-19 sector benchmark. Thank you to everybody that signed up, and thank you to those that are working with your different ticketing systems to get yourself set up. I know we're in touch with many of you to get that data rolling in. Good news, we now have UK and US benchmark groups. We've got enough volume of data to create those benchmark groups. And last week, we launched our first dashboard, which looks a little bit like this. It looks at your ticket sales and revenue. The more of you that join, the better the data. We can support many ticketing systems, and if we can't, let's get you on board so we can let you know when you can. We'll follow up at the end of today's webinar with details of how to sign up. And we'll shortly be releasing our next dashboard, which focuses on behavior by customer loyalty type. And here's a preview. You're going to be able to see exactly how your customers are behaving compared to the benchmark group. This will help you focus directly on messaging that we've talked through in our past TRG 30 sessions, which include leaning on loyalists and planning to sell futures to your underrepresented segments. The headline here from the benchmark group so far is that organizations that are segmenting, planning, and incentivizing are selling. We are seeing volume through on ticketing systems, and we're here to help. And the LinkedIn group is your go-to place to find out how. And so while we continue to focus on the now and the short term, today, as Jill said, we're talking about the long term, and we're already looking ahead at data to understand who is buying tickets later in the fall or autumn and into 2021, where we have product to sell. Now, on this chart here, don't get hinked up on the segment names at the bottom. This segments your patrons by loyalty type. What's important is the proportionality of these patron types in future bookings. This data here is directly from your benchmark data, looking at patrons buying tickets after October that have purchased tickets since the start of the crisis. And you can see there, we've segmented them into sort of three groups: most loyal patrons, recent buyers, and new lapsed buyers. And no surprise, we're seeing loyalists, we've said this before, buying ahead more. This isn't so different from a non-COVID-19 world, right? Our subscribers, our members, our multi-buyers typically buy further ahead, particularly when we announce new seasons. But in every way we slice the benchmark data, we see it here too. And you'll remember from last week, Jill said, lean in here. We're really serious. It's the quickest, easiest, best revenue win for you right now. But we were surprised by this. Actually, let's not ignore, we've got nearly 15% of future buyers as new. New bookers are still buying into the future. So just ask yourself now, are you segmenting your content and messaging? Because this is the key for the long haul, which we know we're increasingly in for here. And what's important is that people from all segments are buying. Yes, different ways and proportions, but it's important to remember, as Jill, you're focusing us today on reconciling our short-term and quite frankly understandable instinct to make content available now with this long-term view that we're talking about and seeing here.
Yeah, for sure. You know, and in fact, the short term is this. You know, the short term are empty exhibit halls and empty venues. And in the context of that short term that we all are facing right now, it is absolutely no wonder that we have all gone to digital means of connecting. Whether it is what the American Alliance of Museum is regularly reporting on, digital, in this case, robot-assisted tours, or classes in the dance sector that are increasingly available online, we are there to close the distance between our organizations and our experiences and the social distancing that's now required. We're seeing organizations like the Chicago Symphony doing premieres as they did earlier this week on Facebook. Really creative ways of engaging artists, more than 100 of them. Took up the Shakespeare Challenge to advance their favorite bits of the Bard through the Shakespeare Theater Company. And we all know about what the National Theater is doing. It's remarkable every week through NT Live, and something like more than 1 million or 1.5 million views of their programs and episodes there. It is astonishing. Our friends at Google helped us know and see that their arts and culture site, that the traffic there has grown by more than 500, nearly 1,000% by the end of March. So people are actually reaching out and tapping this content. Your instinct is right, and it is helping us get to the music we love and the art that we love and the experiences that we miss. So our instincts are matched up with how our communities are responding. The media is noticing too. I know you've seen this. So whether it's Tomasini at the New York Times remarking on the power of performance in empty concert halls, or Peter Marks, who says, good news, you know, you can now access all kinds of content. And is there bad news in this? And across the blogosphere, television, and other news sources, all kinds of observations being made right now about our desire to put things online. A little bit of let's keep putting on a show. Acknowledgement that there's not income on the main coming in through this activity. But boy, a lot of increase in activity. The Met's digital team reports 4,000% increase. YouTube views up 150%. Television media noting that theaters, many of you in this virtual room, were in production and began to quickly organize so that you could distribute that content. 60 Minutes in America reported on it 2 weekends ago. Terry Teachout at the Wall Street Journal, famed blogger and writer, acknowledging that streaming videos is starting to become part of the plan here, and the Inquirer recognizing that artists, we are doing this to retain our base and also land new fans, as they call it. As I said, it's astonishing, the volume. And yet, folks, we are just on the second and third lap of this race. It is time for a pit stop. We believe at TRG that we must start to think strategically about this volume of content we're putting out there and successfully engaging our communities in. And so today, what we want to do is give you some things to consider as you consider this pit stop that we're encouraging you to take. First, is your website the hub for your content? Many of your websites look like you're going to be back in performance or your doors will be open next week. And that's not going to happen on the main, if anywhere. Our friends at the Alliance Theater in Atlanta, their homepage and the subsequent landing pages is the place where you can find all of their virtual content and reflects the reality that we all find ourselves in. How does your current homepage and web content compare? And then, how does your content strategy align with where you're going as you consider managing relationships with the people who are engaging online? Whether they're new to you or you're loyalists, do you have a strategy? We're going to make some recommendations today. Last week, Stephen, somebody asked the question, boy, my job has become the dissemination of content. I'm not sure when I'm going to be able to get back to my regular job. As a leader, as a team leader, do you have the staff and resources to keep this up, to go the remaining laps that we have to go? And do you know who's watching? Are you collecting any data on the patrons, on the people, on your community that are engaging and are watching? Do you have the ability to contact them again? This race doesn't end now. It's going to go past even this COVID scare. And we must start attending to the long-term plan that we require. So in the comments and feedback that you've given us about TRG 30, one of the things that you say you appreciate is the next step action that we provide you. So here it is. What does this mean that you should be doing today? Well, first, Stephen and I want you to create that strategic plan for your content sharing. So when you think about that, let's think about how probably your kitchen tables and mine look, the puzzle that we're all trying to put together in our personal lives as a metaphor for the puzzle that we're trying to put together now for our organizational futures and lives. And this has to fit in. So here are the strategic issues that I want you to reconcile now. First, let's track engagement, and let's track engagement beyond straight volume, beyond just likes and shares and views. Do you know if this content that you're sharing is actually broadening your audience? That's the goal. Broadening and diversifying our audiences is going to be critical to our thriving through, our surviving through this COVID-19 crisis. Do you know if your content is achieving this objective? Do you know if your loyalists are engaging with it? When our teams at TRG do the hard work of matching up the Facebook's likes and the Instagram likes, those accounts with loyalists, we find that in traditional times, loyalists aren't always the ones engaging with social media and other content. Do you know if your organization is attracting and engaging with your loyalists? Do you know, in essence, about the impact of this massive effort that you're making right now? Secondly, are you responsibly and effectively deploying what we know are limited financial and human resources? And whether you've got your full team available to you today and you've got to optimize them, or you've got a smaller team, what does this long game mean to that team? We're going to make some suggestions, but this is absolutely part of the requirement today. This is a little bit of an elephant in the room that we're going to come back to, but I want you to be thinking, is there long-term revenue potential with this online product? In classes, in lectures, with your sharing of archives. Revenue management must be part of what we begin to think about. Can you see an opportunity? And finally, that's not our decision obviously to make, or even recommendation to make. That relates to your mission and business model and sensibilities. But if not a paywall, how about a data wall that enables you to connect with and curate relationships with the people that you are closing the distance with right now? Finally, this provocation. Is it time now to be thinking about how you, using the segmentation, or whatever segmentation makes sense in your organization, how might we think about how you curate this content based on who your patrons are? And with that, consider these tactical steps. For your most loyal patrons, when we've been in our traditional season, that has meant access. That can mean access now. Can you curate your digital content so that things like Cocktails with a Curator and private concerts, exclusive content, is made available to your loyalist, however you define your loyalist, across geographic and other boundaries? With recent buyers, this is content and a relationship that is more rich than people who know you less. So how does your messaging and content distribution reflect that? And is it targeted? And finally, for potential new patrons, lapsed patrons, this is where we want to welcome and put our arms around our communities broadly. This is absolutely the free content that you've been distributing, but how does it differ from these other categories of patrons that Stephen has advanced? Directionally, you're getting there. And I want to cite a few examples that I hope can inspire you. The management, or the membership director rather, at the Dallas Museum of Art is starting to act in this way. Ingrid is creating content segmentation that is different for members versus non-members. Cocktails with a Curator is her concept. Houston Ballet, for subscribers, exclusively for subscribers, every Saturday morning, grab your mimosas and cozy up to the stage and have brunch with the Houston Ballet. Our friends in San Diego are encouraging their circle patrons to tell stories to other circle patrons. So I've highlighted, for instance, their circle patrons, Michelle and Peter, wanted to share their story about how they're sharing Shakespeare with their children, and they're encouraging other patron circle members to do similarly. At the Wallace Annenberg Center in Hollywood, in America, an exclusive live piano masterclass is being made available only to donors as a way to recognize and connect with them. And I mentioned the Toronto Symphony last week, who tapped our guest artists who won't be in concerts live to connect with subscribers and donors. And I mentioned this elephant, Stephen, that we talked about in preparation for today. today it feels responsible and required to make content free. We agree. We agree. And there still must be a question, and there are examples about how organizations are responsibly and fairly and in a segmented way developing content that makes sense for their business, that might be not only short-term opportunities, but might serve them in the long term. So the Washington Ballet is offering classes with low fees and enrollment required so that they can manage relationships over time. The Milwaukee Rep, like many of you, was able to navigate and negotiate to film and make available, as you see here, for rent, productions and experiences. The Creation Theater in Oxford, they anticipated and doubled the number of views and downloads for thousands of pounds, the content that they made available in England. So these are the things right now that we want to provoke you to consider. And second, let's not use this opportunity to put this concept, these ideas and thoughts into the longer, bigger picture thinking. As I said last week, we're going to have to focus and refocus, pivot and repivot as we go through coming weeks and months. So 2 final questions for your consideration. 1 is your mission. How is this crisis expanding it, changing it? And are your online programs supporting those thoughts and ideas? Are they helping you explore opportunities for your mission's expansion? And how are you budgeting, reforecasting around those scenarios? Jerry Saltz, who's the senior art critic at the New York Magazine, I want to close with a quote, Stephen, that he made recently that really captivated my attention. He said, we need to play loose, loving and generous, being as creative and unafraid as possible, adapting to change, not falling back on old or inapplicable dogmas. We all want to go to the distance for what we love. And folks, that distance has begun. Let's talk about it. Stephen?
Thank you, Jill. And, you know, the elephant in the room and that section at the end has certainly provoked some questions that have popped up. If you want to add your questions, click on Q&A, type and send your message. You can submit it anonymously. And remember, if we don't get to your question today, we will answer it on our LinkedIn virtual network. But as you submit those questions, Jill, I know you'd like to talk a little bit about next week, where we're rebranding TRG 30 to TRG 45.
Yes, just for a moment. Next week, I am so pleased to bring to our virtual table Fred Reicheld. Fred is the designer, inventor, creator of the Net Promoter Score and system, the author of several books, most recently The Ultimate Question. We will be sending to you after this program a link to a video series that I did with Fred in his home in Cape Cod. The Net Promoter System is so much more than a score. It is an orientation around customer loyalty and employee loyalty, and at no time has it felt more critical to have this focus than now. So Fred will be with us. We've extended this time so that we have time to hear from him about how this orientation can serve us in a crisis. And we've extended that time so we have time for your questions of him too.
And you know, we're interested in how we can serve you further and better during this crisis. So your feedback on our virtual roundtables here are really, really crucial. And popping up on your screen now is a quick live poll where we're asking you the question, how likely are you to recommend a TRG 30 virtual roundtable to a colleague? 10 being absolutely, you're going to email everybody in your contact list right now and tell them that they need to sign up for next week. And 1, absolutely not. I would not. And if there is additional feedback or provocation that you would put to us to include content in future sessions, we're really keen and interested to hear on that. So
yeah. super important to get this feedback. We pay attention to it, live by it, and design around it. So thank you so much for this feedback you're giving us right now.
Yeah, we really appreciate that. And before we answer the first questions, just a reminder that next week we start our Executive Recovery Summits exclusively for executive directors and chief executives. They're beginning, as I say, next week. We've added new dates because of the number of signups we've had. The web address is on here to register. Again, you'll receive that in the follow-up information, and the address here to join the benchmark. Several questions around you're registering for the benchmark. How do you find out more? We will get back to you. And let's talk at trgarts.com is a fast way to get in touch with us if none of these routes are the way. So thank you for your feedback. Let's move on to some questions. Jill, there seems to be an expectation, this comes around the question around price, and I know that you talked about business model, but I think there's some guidance questions here that people are asking. There's an expectation that the cultural offering is free, but is there scope to turn it into a funding stream when big hitters are giving content for free? And the National Theatre is an example here, right?
Yeah. Well, the question about segmentation, I think, is part of this answer. So it is absolutely right to, this metaphor I didn't, or hashtag I didn't design, but to use our content to close the distance and the gap between where we are now and our community. And these weeks and months in front of us, however that long, does afford us an opportunity to test and segment the audiences that we're distributing that content to, test and learn. You will hear Fred talk about that next week. So one size does not fit all. One strategy is not going to serve us for the entirety of this time. And how we look at the different categories of audiences and patrons we have in our databases and environments, and allow our communities to tell us and help inform about what the right price is. I think there's no one right answer, but we've got to start testing and learning here.
Yeah, this next question is really interesting. I'm interested in your thoughts on this, Jill. The question talks about the bit that we're selling and putting out there now that's missing. So what scope do we have to underline what does not work online? That we're selling the bit that's missing, the shared experience, the live element, the pin drop moment. If we're not monetizing and we're essentially live venues once this is over, is there a strong way of stressing in part that this is not the same thing? You know, how as we put this content out, do we negotiate the missing element? I think that's such an interesting point.
Yeah, there's a lot of people talking about this very thing, that we all believe in the live experience. I watched or read a lively debate about the future is digital. Let's all get over it. And the future is not digital. The live experience is the power. I think we all acknowledge, as humans, we acknowledge, we're not TV producers. We are live curators and presenters and producers, or rather, we're those things of live experiences that we can feel and touch and be in. And my own take is that we need to remind people of the promise of that return, remind people about the power of that, and acknowledge that in the interim, we want to ensure that we can still connect. We want to ensure that this bridge can be there. And I think it's both and, it's not either or.
Yeah. The last 60 seconds, Jill, let's popcorn some of these questions quickly.
Yeah,
could I steal money allocated to paid media for the autumn or fall shows to building my content and online program?
Right now, if I was a betting woman, I'd allocate some of it. Yeah, I would allocate some of it, you bet.
Yeah. Is now a good time to have one-on-one meetings via Zoom with subscribers or subscriber donors to check in with them? Or even
yes, I love that idea, yes.
And there is some great success of organizations implementing live meetings with donors and subscribers right now.
For sure.
How do I convince my artistic director to start creating content? We've stayed away from putting out original content online because the AD is uncertain about the ROI.
How do I convince them to or not to?
To create.
Oh, yes. Well, I think this is a matter of war room, regular conversation that's informed by data. You got to get joined up, and so that you can start curating and getting this content to the right person at the right time.
Is there any data to support whether future sales are up or down against average? Across the board, sales are down. And in some of our benchmark groups significantly, I would say that. We're now working on an advanced dashboard to give you more information around that. We're at time, really sorry folks. Really great questions. We will get to the rest in our TRG 30 virtual network. The link is here. We are so pleased to have you all join us again at whatever time of the day it is for you, and looking forward to seeing you for TRG 45, a 1-week rebrand next week. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Stephen.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.